Hello and welcome along to the Panto podcast. This week my guest is puppeteer Ronnie LeDrew. In this episode, Ronnie tells me how he became a top puppet operator, the story of his involvement with the iconic Zippy, and offers plenty of advice for getting into the industry. So please, sit back and enjoy the latest Panto podcast. My guest for today's Panto podcast is Ronnie LeDrew. Hello.
Hello. Nice to talk to you.
Yes, finally, after all these years of watching your performances, some people might not know the face, might not even know the name, but they'll definitely know somebody you've been a big part of.
Absolutely. Well, for 20 years, I was Zippy on Rainbow. Now, I didn't originally do his voice, but I operated the puppet. But I've taken over doing the voice because sadly Roy Skelton, who was the voice artist that I worked with on Rainbow, sadly died a few years ago, and wonderful Fremantle Media, who own the brand, suggested that I would take over. Well, actually, I sort of did give a big nudge and say, "Oi, I've been listening to his voice. It's been part of me. I'm sure I can do a good interpretation of Zippy," and and that's what I did, and I've been doing it ever since. But it's weird, isn't it? You work with somebody. I mean, we were very much close. I mean, when he took a breath, the puppet, I knew that he was going to be doing Zippy, if you know what I mean. Now, if this was video, you'll see me as a puppeteer. I speak with my hands, and in a minute I talk about puppets, my hands will start waving about. So if I touch and bang the mic, it's only because, you see, I can't keep still when I'm a puppeteer, or my hands can't. Anyway, let's get back onto the subject. Yes, so I've been doing Zippy's voice and the puppet for over 20 years now, yeah.
When you were a child then, were you fascinated by puppets?
I was, but I tell you what I was more fascinated by, believe it or not. It was Sunday afternoon matinees on television. They were the old black and white films, the musicals, the Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire stuff, anything that had music and entertainment, live entertainment. The other wonderful show that I always watched, and my mum let me stay up for, and this is when I was very young, Sunday Night London Palladium during the 60s. I loved it. In fact, I'm not a maker of puppets or a maker of things, really. I'm pretty cack-handed, but I made a little model theatre, and I even put little neck mics. They used to have, they used to have that wonderful mic that used to go up and down in the Palladium. I love that. I was fascinated by that. The little doors opened, and up it came up. But anyway, I even had these little figures, and I made wire neck mics for them because I thought, this is television, I've got to copy exactly. But people like Bruce Forsyth, oh gosh, all the compares, the wonderful variety. Gracie Fields, even I saw, Liberace, all these amazing iconic people. Bob Hope, I mean, you name them. The Americans came over. One of my real, I suppose, favourite variety artists was, believe it or not, was Norman Wisdom, and they did this one-off show, Sunday Night London Palladium, and I saw it live, as it were, and I know it's been put on YouTube. And it was just the two of them. There was a strike. The
strike,
I think,
yes.
Yeah. And they did a two-man show, and I found that hilarious. I mean, it was all the Panto sort of gags. The decorating sketch. I mean, classic stuff, I mean, Bruce with his cigarette and everything, and Norman tripping over stuff, and the wallpaper falling over it. I mean, it was lovely stuff. And then also the other thing I loved was the revolves on the Palladium in those days. I mean, the Sunday night da 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 dee dee dee, and they all went round, and then they did a classic thing where they were chasing round trying to stand on it. I mean, they're knocking over the Sunday night sort of Palladium things on the front. I mean, all that was my intro to theatre, really. We lived in a council flat in South London. There was my sister and my mum and dad. And basically, we didn't have loads of money or anything like that, but all of us enjoyed watching these variety shows. And I'd love to have gone to a drama school. I mean, sadly, we didn't have the money to pay. This was the nearest one was Italia Conti, which was in Landor Road, which was not far from where I lived in South London. But they've moved now to the Barbican. I'm not sure whether they're still there. I think they are. Anyway, but this and that, they had sort of people like Bonnie Langford and all that. I mean, I was much older than Bonnie Langford, but I mean, she was classic. But anyway, sort of quite a well-known people. So I was very into variety and comedians and ventriloquists, believe it or not, although I've never done ventriloquism. I can't say that word properly. But I was very lucky. I met people like Arthur Worsley, who did Charlie Brown. He was a naughty, I loved him. Lovely man. Really lovely. I'm in touch with his son now, which is quite nice, on Facebook. Marvellous social media. But and people like Steve Hewlett now, and lovely Max Fulham, who's a brilliant young he's just a fantastic vent artist. We're on the same committee. We're on the British Puppet and Model Theatre Guild, and I'm the president, and he's one of the council members. But it's all lovely. So, but no, that's my background. I did do a couple of school plays, but I was a weedy child as a kid, and I went to the drama school and the music groups and all that sort of stuff. But they didn't really. They thought, well, what can we put him in? You know, he's a bit sort of like my voice didn't break till I was about 16. So I had this, oh, hello, you know, and I thought, oh, God, you know, this was senior school, so it was, it's all a bit, you know, terrible. But so I was sadly didn't have much to do with the drama in school. But at home, I started in the long summer holidays. We used to possibly have a week where my mum would take us to a holiday camp or something like that. But we could only afford a week's holiday. But anyway, the rest of the time I was at home, and I used to put shows on in the flats where we lived. So we were on the first floor. There was a stairway going up to the second floor, so the kids, if they were around, and I don't know, I just shouted out from the balcony, I'm going to do a puppet show, you're going to see, or a show. And they used to come up and sit on the horrible concrete steps. Oh, cold bums. But anyway, it was a raked auditorium. I didn't know at the time. I had an upturned table. I had a wind-up gramophone. I'm actually born in Canada, so I don't have any sort of real relations in England. There was one aunt, I think, anyway, who was sort of related to my mother's mother or something, but most of them were all just friends, but they were all aunties and uncles. Anyway, and the flats was very much a community where we shared everything. You know, if you needed a cup of sugar, you know, knock down the door, say, well, have you got any sugar, darling? And I'm a bit, and you know, all that sort of stuff. So there was quite a nice community. Anyway, the shows were my wind-up gramophone with Gracie Fields records. I don't know where I got them from. I think probably from, now I'm trying to think. I think it was like a neighbour gave me the wind-up gramophone thing. But and then these records, and they were 78, so there was Victor Sylvester. I really wanted orchestral music like they had in the Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire movies, you know. But you know, beggars can't be choosers. So I used this stuff, and and then I had oh gosh, when I think about it, I mean, I think I had 3 Pelham puppets. They're the ones that you could buy in the shops. Partly because they were quite expensive for us anyway to buy. But I had 3. I had a poodle, I had a bulldog, and I had, what did the other? Oh, Mitzi. She was one of the dancing girls. So goodness knows what I did with them. But anyway, I did sort of improvise with the music. I think Mitzi probably sang as Gracie Fields, a lonely petunia in a, you know, onion patch or something. But anyway, there you go. But the kids seemed to like it. I seemed to enjoy performing with the puppets. I used to introduce the shows, you know, and that was my sort of stuff. There was one lady in the flats who used to work with Ivan Novello, in his wonderful musicals in the sort of well, the time she worked would be probably 50s, early 50s or something. He used to do all these tours and things. Anyway, she was a wonderful lady, Mrs. Coote. Now it's funny, she wasn't an auntie. I always called her Mrs. Coote. She had a lovely Cockney voice, but because she was a dancer, but she had lovely memories of all this theatre and all that, and that just thrilled me, you know, listening to her. And so I suppose there were my influences. I had a friend, Brian, who was his mum was from Edinburgh. They were quite nice, And she always used to say to me, if you go into theatre, you've got to speak correctly and pronounce your vowels and, you know, and all this sort of stuff. So that was quite interesting. I was always, you can tell, I do like doing voices and larking around. And as a kid, I used to sort of take the mickey out of all the people around, or not take the mickey, but sort of just, so when I say imitate their voices if I found them interesting. So, very cheeky. But so, yeah, that's the sort of background. I eventually saved up my pocket money and bought myself a Pollock's Toy Theatre, a little model theatre. And I did shows with that. I did Harlequinade, I did Hamlet. Can you believe there was I think it's 1947 version. Laurence Olivier did the film version. And the Pollocks, I don't know what it was Pollocks, but some company made a toy theatre version of. So the characters were from the film. So you've got Laurence Olivier with his sword fighting Horatio or whatever, and then there were all the other characters and the ghost that came down, and that was on a piece of cotton. I remember I lowered that down onto the thing. I mean, I can tell you a little story about that. Very interesting about involving an audience. By this time, we moved the audience into my bedroom in the flats because obviously, you know, it's a bit more theatrical. And I had this tiny little stage, and I was doing the shows. They were cut out. Basically, you cut. They were sort of plain things. You could colour them in if you wanted to, and then you stick a bit of cardboard on the base of them so that they would stand up, and you had little wires that you stuck them to. And anyway, you had a whole load of these characters and scenes that went into the theatre. I loved the whole fact that it was, you know, the curtain came down, you lifted it, and you did all the scene changes and put stuff in, and it was lovely. Anyway, so I was doing the rampart scene, I remember, and it was the ghost was coming down, scaring Horatio on the ramparts or something, and I was doing all this, and I had this sort of script on a booklet pinned up, and I was reading that. Actually, my eyes were quite good then. Anyway, I'm squinting. I'm thinking, why am I doing that? I'm a young kid. Anyway, so the ghost came to, did all this, and they all seemed to be so quiet out. I had a cardboard surround, so I was sort of hidden. I thought that was right. I didn't want them to see me doing all this rubbish. So anyway, they were very quiet, this one. So I thought, this is marvellous. They're really into it. And I thought, I'll finish that scene and I'll come round and say, well, I hope you're enjoying. I came round, and believe it or not, they'd crept out. They were bored out of their minds because I was having fun, but not I know, it's one of those things. But what a lesson to learn so early. Don't just play for yourself. You're playing to an audience. You're actually entertaining them, and that's the big thing. You'll get a marvellous feedback from them if you do it correctly. I mean, I learned this much later on, but I do remember that. And you know, it's a story that I've even put in my book and everything, but it's absolutely essential to me that I'm really glad I learned that so early on in my career. Anyway, there you are. That's sort of background of my puppet career. I mean, I could go on and say what happened when by the time I was sort of 13, I went around and because no internet, you know, you have to look up these things. And I don't know how I found there was a British Puppet and Model Theatre Guild. And I thought, what's this then? And they had their meetings in St Gabriel's Hall in Vauxhall, which wasn't very far from me, so I could get a bus there. And I said to my mum, look, it's 7 till 9. I know it's a school day, but, you know, would it be? Yes. She was very nice and said yes. So I went along to that. And how I discovered that sort of organisation was that on the back of one of my Pollock's toy sheets, there was a sort of saying, interesting sort of organisations if you're interested in puppets, British Puppet and Model Theatre Guild. I thought, that's good. Anyway, it also said there was the Pollock shop, because originally I bought my toy theatre at Hamley's. I mean, how grand was that? But anyway, you know, the big toy shop in Oxford Street. So I thought, I'll find out this place. So I looked up where it was, and it was in sort of off at the time. It was in Monmouth Street, sort of in Theatreland, actually. Lovely, sort of just beyond the Seven Dials, you know, Monmouth Street is along that sort of area. Anyway, the shop was there, and there was a guy there. He was the archivist of the guild, and he was setting up some puppet exhibition in the shop. And I got chatting to him. He said, well, you must come along. We have meetings at St Gabriel's Hall in Vauxhall. And that's how I discovered the guild. Now, going there, I met an amazing array of puppeteers, Punch and Judy men, marionette groups. I mean, they were sort of husband and wife teams mostly at that stage. And there was a wonderful guy called Percy Press, who was a wonderful Punch and Judy man. And he was the chairman, and he was hilarious. It was just, I don't know, it was fabulous time. And so I got chatting to all these lovely people. A lot of them had been in the business for years and years. I mean, they were, I would say, old men, fairly old, but I mean, they took to me. I think I was quite a character. Wasn't too shy when I spoke to all these people. They were quite nice. I said, "Can I have a look at your puppet?" And some of them would go, "No, I think just you can look but don't touch." So I think, oh, but some of them said, "Yeah, you can, I'll have a go." Oh, this was good. So it was really lovely. So the Guild was a place where I met a lot of puppeteers, and one of them was John Blundell. Now, here's a name you think, "Oh, who's John Blundell?" But in fact, he was the guy that designed the original brains for Thunderbirds. He worked for Jerry Anderson, and at the time he was working on Fireball XL5, so this was the early 60s, that sort of time. And so there we go. I met him. He said, "Oh, come along to another puppet organisation, because I think you'd like this couple. They run it." And this was called the EPA. And I thought, EPA, what's that? Educational Puppetry Association. I thought it was a bit, sounds a bit, maybe I don't think it's my cup of tea. Anyway, I thought, no, don't take, go along. So I went down, and it was a basement in just off Holborn, Kingsway, that sort of area. And Southampton Park? No, not Southampton. Anyway, I can't remember the name of the road now. Anyway, the building is still there, but I think the basement's all posh now. But anyway, it was this funny little building stairway going down into this basement. And there were this wonderful couple, Violet Philpott and her husband, Alexis, but in fact he was known his theatrical name was Panto, and he did lovely glove puppet shows. She did as well, made lovely puppets, and they were my glove puppet mentors. So because Panto just said, "Go into the stage, I can see you want to perform. You're performing now without even touching a puppet." So I thought, oh, right, okay. I mean, there were a few teachers there. It was mostly a place where teachers went along and used puppets for sort of educational as tools, I suppose you'd say, to help them get their lessons across to the kids. Anyway, I went in there and I was playing with the puppets, doing funny voice, doing all this sort of stuff, and just having a ball. And Panto said, "Look, you've got to have your own stage. You should do your own show with a glove puppet thing." So, but he was very clever. He said, "Look, you don't, I'll help you, but you're going to have to help me make your own stage, and we'll assist you with the puppets." Violet, is a brilliant puppet maker, and she did. And I have a Dodo and a Snitchly Titch puppet that I've used from, I think it's 1963. I've still got them. I still use Dodo a lot. Look at me. If this was a video, my arms are moving around like mad. But anyway, so it was really lovely. They were fantastic help. Then going back to the Guild, I heard about this puppet theatre called the Little Angel Theatre. And I thought, a puppet theatre? And where is it? North London. Oh, I can go on the Northern Line to the Angel and walk to the... Anyway, that's what I did. And I visited the Little Angel Theatre. I went with an Australian puppeteer friend who was come over for some sort of big congress that this World Puppetry Organisation was putting on called Unimar. Anyway, she was very nice and took me to the theatre. She sort of knew John Wright, and obviously she was a lot older, and took me along. Anyway, I had it was a life-changing moment, because I sat in an auditorium specially built for puppets. At that time it was an 80-seat theatre. The old Collins Music Hall down the road had been burnt down, I think 1959 or something, or I think it was an arson thing, but nobody knows now what actually happened to it. It was a little bit sort of in the last stages of its sort of working life. Anyway, the seats were taken from, John managed to get the seats, John Wright, as the founder director of the theatre, managed to get the seats, the Collins Musical seats. We got the old exit lights, that he made a sort of letter, what we call a letterbox opening proscenium arch for the puppets, and they were marionettes. And the show I saw was The Little Mermaid, the Hans Andersen story. and it was absolutely perfect for marionettes because the mermaids would be swimming in the water. The first scene, the curtain goes up, lights go down, wonderful music, lovely lighting. I mean, all my favourite sort of stuff. It was just so beautiful. And you had this figurehead rock, and you had the mermaid next, and the first picture you saw through a gauze, and I love gauzes. I'm very into all the old theatrical things, and it was side lit, so you just look through the gauze, and then the gauze goes up eventually, and the show properly starts. But the narration was there, and the mermaid had her head against the figurehead rock, and you had this lovely voice saying, "This is the story of the Little Mermaid, no ordinary mermaid, but a princess, and the most beautiful of the merman king's 3 daughters." And so it went on, and then the curtain went up, or the gauze went up, and the mermaid swam round the figurehead rock. And wow, it was beautiful. The music was just right, the puppetry was beautiful. And then, anyway, the story is terribly sad. I mean, it wasn't the sort of Disney finish to it. I mean, she dives off the boat after kissing her beloved prince, so she'd saved a while before, and he'd thought that Princess Jasmine had saved him, and because she didn't have legs at the time, she went down to the sea witch, and the sea witch said, "You can have legs and you can see this prince again." And so she did, but she couldn't. The thing was, to have legs, she had to forego her voice, so she couldn't speak to the prince to say, "I was the one who saved you." So there was that lovely sort of I don't know what you'd call it, but the drama, that was the sort of drama of the piece. Anyway, she kisses him at the end, and she dives off the boat, and she sadly becomes part of the foam of the sea and everything, and that's the sort of end of the story. Oh, I mean, you're all weeping like mad, but it's stunningly beautiful. And after seeing that show, I was so entranced by the theatre, by the people that were running it, the audience. That it was just fantastic. It had everything that I thought puppetry was all about. And so I said to Mrs. Murray, who I was with, I said, "Oh, I really want to work here. Do you think they'd let me work here?" She said, "Well, all you do have to do is ask." Anyway, I was too nervous, fun enough, believe it or not, to ask at that stage. But I did write a letter. And I wrote a letter, and John Wright wrote back to me and saying, "Yes, I remember your visit with Mrs. Murray. Do come along and have a meeting with us." And I did, straight from school, a few weeks afterwards or whatever. And the whole thing was, I said, "Do you ever have apprentices?" He said, yes, I've had apprentice. You'd be the second apprentice if we decide to take you on." Oh my goodness, And he said, "You've been backstage, haven't you?" I said, "Well, I'd love to go backstage." He took me backstage. I put some bags over the puppets. I mean, they were hanging there because they'd just finished another show, and it was. I just thought, oh, this is just fabulous. Anyway, I said, "Is there any chance?" And he said, "Well, don't worry, we like meeting you." I think there was only a group of 5 people basically, so they ran the whole business, and I would have been the 6th person coming in. And basically, what happened was, I went home. I was terribly excited. My father was a teacher. And he was a little bit, not miffed, but a little bit, thought, "Well, this is puppetry. I know you love theatre, and we all love watching, but, you should really think about a proper career, And of course, sadly, the headmaster of my school, my comprehensive school that I went to down the road, had written, because I'd spoken to the deputy head. I mean, the head was a bit of this person up in the clouds somewhere. Anyway, and said, "Look, I might stay on and take some exams, but I don't know. I'm not academically, I'm not terribly brilliant." Anyway, what happened was, I decided to leave, and you could leave at 15, because I received a letter from John Wright saying, "Look, we can accept you as our second apprentice. The only thing is, we can't afford to pay you because we just don't have enough money. The theatre's, at the beginning of its beginnings. And but if you can sort of manage to survive, we'll teach you everything you want to know about puppet theatre and running the theatre." And I persuaded my parents. This is a rather long answer, isn't it, to your question? But anyway, I persuaded my parents to join the theatre, and they said, "Yes, of course you can join." They gave me 6 months, 3 months for me to get used to being part, with the company and see whether I'd like it, and 3 months for them to get used to me, because I was quite a character. Anyway, it turned out it was absolutely fine. We got on really well. And in fact, I stayed there initially for 8 months. So that is my beginnings.
I would like to know, when those children crept out of the performance, did you continue with the rest of the show or not?
I didn't, sadly. I know, isn't that unprofessional?
How terrible.
It is
They
terrible.
might have nipped out for an ice cream.
They're absolutely right, but no.
They're going to come back and been let down.
I know, I let down the profession. I should have carried on, even if there wasn't an audience. I mean, basically, they'd gone and they were probably playing outside on the playing fields or whatever. No, sadly. But I always take it as a positive thing that I thought, well, actually, I must be doing something wrong. Why did they go? Because I thought it was really wonderful. I was having a ball doing all this stuff, but not really transferring my enthusiasm, my sort of fun to them. And of course, this is a very limited puppet theatre show. I mean, little cardboard figures.
But when you said you had the sort of the blackouts around you, so you couldn't see.
No.
Do you still wonder, what's going on in the auditorium?
Well, do you know what you do as a puppeteer when you're performing? For instance, nowadays a lot of it's open. You can see your audience because you're behind. But in the early days, we always hid. Even in the Little Angel, we were up on the bridge. Nobody could see you; just saw the puppets. And the same thing with me in my glove puppet booth when I started doing my glove shows. What you do is you develop ears. I mean, you've got your ears, but you listen to your audience and you hear their responses, and that is the thing that you do, because you can't see. I mean, I know some punch performers have little peepholes in their booth and they can look through. I didn't want that. I didn't have a hand free really, and so it was. But I just sort of developed listening to. And for instance, I can tell you some of the early things when I brought a character on my glove puppet stage. And the first response for the kids was, "Get off your rubbish," from some kid. How lovely is that? Oh my God, I've only just, haven't even opened my mouth. So I thought, So I walked the puppet off and I said, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Inside. And then there's suddenly, in that time, I was thinking, oh, this is awful. Oh dear, the audience saying, "Where are the puppets? We come here to see the puppets. Where are they?" You see? Now unbeknown to me, I had given them a chance to sort of think, oh, where are they? Where's the puppet? And they responded like that. So I brought on, and they were absolutely fine. So it's that thing. I'm listening to the audience. I'm learning from, their responses. I mean, there's certain responses you don't, you get some really, I'll tell you one, a really bad one. I was doing my show much, much later on. I was fairly confident in my performances. And in fact, Matthew Corbett from Sooty fame was in the audience, and I wanted Matthew to see my show, and it was years ago, and so it was full of. It was in a horrible, actually, a tent. It was in a huge marquee, so it was really hot and not nice to perform in. But anyway, there you go. I was there doing it, and it was all going on quite well. And the dodo came out, who's frightfully like that, and he's like an old uncle. And he was starting to do his little stuff. And all my stuff is mostly improvised round the story. That's how I do. And from the voice from the audience said, "Dodo's a puff!" Well, the whole audience said, it was like, oh my God. And the dodo, I sit down to perform, and I was looking up, and the dodo turned around and said, "It takes one to know one, lad." Where did that come from? Because I knew the character really, and the show just took off. Now, it's sort of weird, but isn't that funny? That's showbiz, I suppose. But it's sort of you just learn these things as you go along. I mean, you make mistakes. I mean, again, other things happen in puppet shows. I drop props over the front. Terrible. Are you going to ever get them back again? Because you can't see. And, and I used to say, "Oh, could you throw me back my box of gold? It's rather important for the plot." Or something silly like that. But, a head of the puppet once came off. I sit down, I was putting my hand in the puppet, and I went and I looked, and there was no head on it. The glue had come unstuck. It was a hot day. I was outside, I think, doing something. And I thought, and I had one. That's right. I had one puppet on already, and I was getting another one here. and there was no head. I thought, oh, what are you doing? The dodo was up there. And, I can't. Oh dear, I got stuck. Oh, he's got stuck. Hold on. So I take him off. I find the scrabber on the floor, find the head, put it on, and then Dodo comes up. Oh, are you ready now? It's very embarrassing. And then Snitch would come, and I suddenly realised I put the head on so quickly, I hardly looked back to front. So he came on. Oh, I'm walking in backwards. What am I? And look, I can put my hands behind my back. I mean, your brain is going at 90 miles an hour. So those sort of things, but they really teach you about how to respond to an audience, how to work out problems when they do happen, because I mean, even on normal stage, stuff happens and you just have to go on and get on with it. So yeah, there you go.
You've spoken a lot about glove puppets. What about marionettes?
Well, of course, the marionettes where I started originally at the Little Angel, and I was learning marionettes literally from day one. I'd go up on the bridge, which is a bridge that's over the stage, and you stand up. It's about 6 foot above the actual stage, and you lean against that, and you work your string puppet. Now, with the marionettes that John Wright carved, and they were all wooden, beautifully carved marionettes. They were about 26 inches high, but you needed one puppeteer to work the puppet, on one puppet. So you could have 6 puppets on, as there were 6 puppeteers at a time. But mostly there was usually 3 main puppeteers. And for instance, when I first started, I wasn't up on the bridge doing the puppets. I was doing the scene changes, doing all the props, stage management, and blowing smoke down a rubber tube, which was revolting for fun enough, the Sea Witch's magic bowl, when the mermaid had come to see her to say, look, I want to be a human, not a mermaid anymore. And it was just a lovely scene with this amazing witch looking over this red light, and then cigarette smoke billowing out, and I was smoking a cigarette and blowing it down to that. Put me off smoking, even if I wanted to smoke. That was something I never did. It was revolting, but the effect was absolutely brilliant. But yeah, so it took me a few months to learn, to work a string puppet. They are probably the most difficult to work. But I'm really pleased that I started with the marionette, because they are difficult and they take a lot of time. It gives you the right ethos about puppetry. Puppetry isn't something you just put your hand in and go, oh yeah, isn't it easy? You've actually got to work out the right sort of moves for them, and what they look best again for the audience. I always go back to the audience, what they can see. And so with the marionette, you've also got a thing where you're above the puppet and you're looking down, and you can see the stage, and you can see what you're doing next to another puppet. It's standing there. It's seeing whether you're masking it or whether you're taking its light and all that sort of stuff. So you learn an awful lot at the beginning. So I was very lucky to eventually, work one small puppet in the show, not small, but had a small scene in the show. And gradually I ended up being, as John Wright called me, one of his top operator, which is terribly sweet, and we became. I was so nervous of him when I first met him, but he was an absolute gem of a character. I mean, amazing man. He was the first person to set up a building. It was an old temperance hall, and he acquired this building, I think 1959. He opened in 1961. It took the 2 years to get there's no roof on the building. I mean, he had this vision. He thought, we can get a new roof. There was Anderson's Woodyard. He managed to get them to donate the wood and for the roof. I mean, a charismatic man, and he formed a charity to run the theatre. There was a board and everything. I mean, he did it all correctly. I mean, he was in his early 50s when he started doing that. So, he'd been in the business for a long time. Just after the war, I think he'd started doing puppetry. So he knew it's going to be, and he always had a company. He never did it on his own. He always had sort of 4 or 5 people working with him. And so he knew about, running a company. And we learned, we did everything. I say we printed our own brochures, and we had an Adana printing press. He learnt to typeset the stuff. I mean, extraordinary. We were answering the phone. Hello, Little Angel Theatre, can we help? We're doing everything. The booking book was literally, it wasn't all on computer then. Of course, it was a book, and we ticked things. Say, yes, can we have your telephone number so we can contact you if if things change? And we wrote it all down. So we all took bookings. There was a pencil and a bit of string on the booking book, and if the phone rang, whoever was nearest picked it up and did all that. We took, when we printed our brochures, we used to take them round the Islington. There was a couple of Islington's a little bit different in the early 60s than it is now, but there were some wonderful grand squares and quite wealthy people. So Milner Square, Lonsdale Square, Canterbury Square, all these squares. So we'd go round with the brochures, popping them into the sort of letterboxes and hoping that the more grand people with a little bit of money would like to spend their 5 shillings, can you believe, adults, and I think it was 2 and 6 for kids. This is all the old money, I know. But it was wonderful. They did come. We did shows for the Islington Council during the summer holidays. We had they were like paid by Islington Council. There was, I think, 3 weeks, and in the 3 weeks we did 3 different shows. They're all old shows that we could quickly rehearse. After I think we did 2 shows a day, one at 10:30 and one at 2:30, and then after that we'd rehearse the next one, and so on. It's a bit like rep theatre, the old days. So that went on. There were kids from all the flats or wherever who were on holiday. They could go. And again, we used to have. Oh, it was very funny. We did find that sometimes the kids were a little bit riotous. They weren't sort of theatre trained, and so they'd come in and say a show, and it might be a bit too sophisticated for them or something, and they might shout out or something. But most of the stuff was pre-recorded in those days. We didn't have wonderful microphones or anything like that, and John always felt that it was always best to get actors with lovely voices to do the recording, and he did brilliant editing and sound. It was really lovely. But it was quite funny. We used to stand at the door, and the kids came in, we'd have to, we're not quite frisk them, but they'd come in with all sorts of weapons. When I say weapons, but sort of maybe a sort of, I don't know, not noisy things that they might, like cap guns or something, but they'd fire in the middle of and the audience would go mad. So we'd have to we just became aware of that sort of thing as the years went on. I think we did it for about 2 or 3 years or something. Kids got to remember that, last year we went and saw a puppet show, this was fun. So yeah, no, it's a great time. You can tell I'm still in love with the theatre now. I mean, it's its 60th birthday this year in November, and because of COVID, sadly, we were not being able to celebrate, with a big event. But they've been doing lots of stuff online, like so many theatres, like I've been doing, without missing like mad public performances and all the rest of it. But they've been interviewing people that have made puppets for the theatre. They've been they wanted, I think, show an old marionette show, which would have been lovely, but I think it's about the money and being able to open the theatre, because sadly it's got benches. I mean, the theatre was revamped over the years from the times I first talked about it, and basically you could get 100 people in, but with the health and safety sort of regulations now, which is absolutely fine, you get about 85. Well, that's not enough. We couldn't even know. I mean, if we got 20 people in because of COVID or whatever it is, no social distancing, it's just not worth it. And it couldn't afford to pay the puppeteers, blah, 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 all that. So the actual building has been closed for a while, but they do have studios now, and the studios have been opened. They just opened, I think last month, whenever it was, we were able to open. And that's basically a black box. It was an old community hall, and we had workshops in there, and there's more office space and a bit of storage space and stuff like that. But that has, large stairways, exits and things. You can go in and you can exit a different way, and all the rest of it's much more social, COVID okay, as it were. And so they have had a couple of performances, and there will be performances going on there for that. But yeah, no, it's a bit sad, really. The theatre has changed. Sorry, I've got onto the up to date now, haven't I? With the sad. It's all going to be wonderful soon. We hope. We fingers crossed. But
we're getting there, aren't we?
We're getting there slowly. It's going to be a slow process, isn't it? Really. But there we go.
How long does it take you to kind of develop or create a puppet's character?
That depends on the character. If it's a baddie, that's quite fun because you know it's going to be, I'm going to make him like. I have a robber in one of my shows.
Or do you start off with a voice, or do you start with the look?
It's the look of it. I mean, as I say, I'm not a maker, so I'll get somebody to design and make something, and I say, "Oh, that's like, can you make his nose a bit bigger, or can you make the ears, or whatever?" And then when I get the puppet on my hand, then I start playing about with the voices. I usually sit in front of a mirror, and I look at the puppet and I move it around if it's a glove puppet. And I start playing, oh, I like, no, I'll make him talk like that. Or whatever. Or he might be very sophisticated, so he might talk, And I just play around with the voices. And if it feels right to that puppet, I'll try and remember that voice. That's how I do it, really. Marionettes, each puppet is a different technique. Marionettes, you're a bit more distanced. And I find sometimes I find them more hard to voice. But I tend just to act. They mime, they just do movements. I have a marionette that I always take round with me because I'm so proud of marionettes. I think they're most beautiful figures. And I just use that either if there's a bit of music playing or something, I might do something to music. But I just show different positions and how it relates to me. For instance, a marionette, I'm standing up working at puppets and it will come along and, be a bit shy of the audience, suddenly notice the audience and be a bit shy and come running and sort of hide and cower at my leg or something like that. And that brings an immediate response to the audience. Again, it's all this I've learned over the years. Each puppet has its way of, I'm going to say manipulating an audience, but I mean, that's what it is. And so, and that sort of thing. And then just finding, marionettes are lovely. John always used to say, it's you find a position, you hold it, and then you take a breath and you move on to the next one. And it's not all this sort of wafting their arms around or dolly waggling, as they called it in the business a long time ago. It's about keeping strong, truthful to the character that it happens to be, and also making sure the audience can see. These day and age, sometimes people are doing most lovely shows and visually, but they sometimes forget that if you do a puppet right down here and an audience is in in an auditorium, they can't see it. It's got to be up there so the audience can see. And it isn't always the case, but sometimes I've worked with theatre directors and they say, oh, we've got a puppet here and we want to use it. I said, well, it's quite small. I think we're going to have to keep it up or else the audience just not going to see it and it's not going to have a wonderful impact. So it's that sort of thing. So you just have to sort of train people on, and as I say, I'm training my audience to enjoy puppetry. They're giving me so much back as well from their reactions and stuff. I suppose a rod puppet, I'm just trying to tell you different sort of techniques. A rod puppet is one that's worked with sticks and rods for the arms and stuff. That in a way is similar to a marionette. You can chat, it's a bit closer to you. I think the puppets that are close to you, like the hand, a glove puppet. I mean, there's a wonderful Russian puppeteer who says the soul of the puppet is in the palm of the puppeteer's hand, and that's quite right, really. And fun enough, you forget about your own hands. It's when the puppet's on your hand, or when you're working a puppet, it's that puppet that's the real thing. You sort of forget, and you're thinking through the puppet, if that makes sense, and that makes something really exciting when people watch the show.
Does it annoy you to see bad puppetry?
Yes, it does. I think there's so much help now out there. I mean, I know a lot of it's on social media and stuff. You can see some really good stuff, but you can see some really bad stuff. Yeah, I mean, if I see it, if it's live and I feel I'm, there's not a show going on, if there's a break for, I don't know, half an hour or something or other, I might go round the back and say, hello, I'm puppeteer, would you like... They probably won't know me because they might be new to the game, but I'd say, could I give you some comments about, how the audience responded? And I can't, I'm usually truthful. I'm no good. I can't go, oh, that was lovely. I can't say it. I mean, I've been in that place where I've been in an audience as a puppeteer, but they don't know me. I mean, we've talked about me not being a face, as it were, so I can sit in an audience and then people go up to the puppeteers and say, oh, that was lovely, and they've hated it. I know, because I've sat in the audience with them. Or they might have hated one aspect, but they can't, we've got this sort of tactful thing. But I am tactful, hopefully, if I criticise, and I always start off with a positive. There's always something positive in a show. I mean, I can't tell you what it might be, but it's start with that and then say, and see how they respond, and if they say, well, is there anything you found that we could do better? Boom. That I can say, well, I think maybe that would improve it if you
try this.
All those things, yeah.
Be diplomatic.
Just absolutely, as long as you're diplomatic and honest with your response.
And also, they're there, displaying an art form that a lot of people don't do.
Absolutely, and I want the art form to progress like it's done for me over the years. I mean, things have changed. As I say, one time it was puppeteers were all hidden, we were all behind booths or up on a bridge or something. Nowadays we have what we call tabletop puppetry, which is there's a tabletop and the puppets are worked very close to. They're usually small rods or something like that, maybe 3 people behind a puppet, and we're there visibly. I mean, we might be wearing very dark clothes, we're not lit, but our faces are there behind the puppet, and we're concentrating working this puppet, and in fact, hopefully, if the tour comes off a bit later on, I'm in a show called The Dong with the Illuminous Nose, a lovely Edward Lear poem, and the puppeteer is an absolutely brilliant designer maker. He's one of these like John Wright figures, really. I mean, Peter O'Rourke his name is, and he's a wonderful designer, a wonderful puppeteer as well, although he shies away from performing, but he can demonstrate absolutely beautifully. He's made them, he knows what he wants, and he's in love with Edward Lear's nonsense poetry. Perfect. And he's directing the show, and there's 4 of us in the show, and that was a tabletop show, but we were always very carefully lit, so we were there, but we were like shadows behind, and the puppetry and there were lovely bright colours and quite abstract, some of the figures, so it's it's quite visually, it's quite stunning. And this mixture of using different types of puppets, he had a little bit of shadow puppetry. And the lovely thing we can do with puppetry, of course, is scale. You can have large figures, you can have tiny figures, and you do that to get this lovely sort of scale, and you can surprise the audience, with a strange abstract thing that then becomes a creature in the audience's imagination. We have a dream sequence in it, and all these lovely abstract shapes become creatures. They come in individually, and then something joins it, and then 2 legs or something, it has legs, and you think, it's one of those. Don't know what it is, but do you know what I mean? And so that's really the fun of puppetry too. But again, you can do puppetry too, like Harry Corbett did 100 years ago. 100 years ago, how dreadful, sorry. He's 73, isn't he? I think coming up to this year, sooty. But anyway, Harry always performed with himself there, and I loved that. I loved watching that, and I've been lucky enough to work with Harry and Matthew and now Richard Cadell, and it's lovely to see that thing of and you have to believe in that character. Oh yes, that's right, and you carry on, and that's a lovely thing. I do what I call my brilliant bag show, terrible title, but anyway, and it's a bag full of puppets. And instead of me taking my booth and all the stuff, I gave up my car in London. It was just awful. And I thought, well, I'm just going to get up earlier and go on public transport. Well, what can I take on public transport that's not too heavy? So I have a sort of laundry bag full of puppets like that. So all of it
completely inconspicuous.
Absolutely, nobody would know it's my laundry, except there's a rod sticking out of there. But there you go. And I sit on the bus or train or whatever, and I go to the house or the school, and I sit down, and it's a bit like circle time in a nursery, and they all sit round, and I bring out a puppet, and we do stuff like this, and it's lovely. I love it. It's lovely to see their faces, actually, and the lovely thing I really like doing with the puppets is that I have a hedgehog puppet, and I bring it in. It's a surprise. It's in a cardboard box. I open the box up, and the kid, if they're little ones, I mean, it depends. I do it for all ages, actually. and they're all looking up to see what's going on, and out comes his hedgehog. And I said, now you can, if you like, one or two of you, if you want to come and stroke him, because he quite likes to be stroked, but you have to stroke him this way. If you stroke him that way, you get prickles in your fingers, so be careful. Anyway, 17 kids will put their hands up, and I said, well, just a few at a time. So they come up and they start stroking. It's so sweet. They love it. But then you get some parents, bless them, who have a very shy child but wants them push them forward. So they push their child forward, and the kid's going like this, doesn't want to go. And I think the first thing with a puppet, well, my whole thing is that it must be a positive experience with puppetry. I mean, with the young, it's probably the first theatrical thing they'll ever see. So if I see that happening, because now I can see it, I make the hedgehog really shy, and I say, oh, sorry, it's a bit shy, I'm sorry. And it's amazing. The kid immediately feels mother's a little bit. I say, look, you don't have to stroke it. It's fine. Well, I tell you what, look, it's going to come down. Look, all you have to do is you just have to touch his nose. And we have and it's so sweet. And you have to wait because they're a bit, and it's so sweet. The little finger comes up and it touches the hedgehog's nose, and that's made its day. Now that is a positive experience. It's enough they will never hate puppets, because it's a great responsibility for puppeteer, particularly if you're playing to very young ones, to make sure that they're going to have a fabulous experience. It's awful if it doesn't work. So yeah, there's all those things.
I remember the emotions I experienced only a few years ago seeing Scott Land perform.
Oh yeah.
He came over from America,
right?
And this puppet literally got to everybody in the audience. You could have heard a pin drop.
Yeah.
He had everybody there.
Yeah. How marvellous. Yeah. You see, that's it. And that was a marionette too, wasn't it? Because he does marionette cabaret work. Brilliant stuff. A lovely maker, and he's been in the business for loads and loads of years. In fact, he was one of the main puppeteers on that lovely film, which had puppets in it. It was a send-up of the Thunderbirds, and I'm trying to remember then it... Yes.
Team America,
exactly. That's right.
Very naughty film.
Oh, very naughty film. And talking of that, it was quite funny. I sort of went. A friend of mine said, "Oh, look, do you want to come along? It's Team America." And I said, "Oh, I don't think so." No, I got into one of my sort of snobby. I said, "No, I think it'll be awful. They're just sending up Thunderbirds and all that, and it's all going to be silly." And he said, "Oh, come on." I said, "Oh, all right." And so I went along. I sat in the audience, local cinema in Islington. And, it started, and we all just screamed with laughter. It was such good entertainment. I mean, rude in some ways, but even the sex scenes, as they call it, I mean, were so funny. They were like Cindy does nothing. I thought that's the way to do sex scenes with puppets, because it's like silly, and I loved all that. But yes, it was brilliantly done, very clever. The guy, I think, the people that did there's a cartoon series that my son always likes.
South Park.
Thank you, South Park. They wrote it, didn't they, and everything.
Apparently, though, they hated the production process.
Oh, really?
Yes,
I didn't know that.
They, according to things I've read,
right,
they set fire to everything afterwards.
No, really? Is this the film or the
sets? The sets and the puppets.
I mean, they did a lot of explosions in the film anyway.
They destroyed everything because they hated the experience.
Oh, how awful! Oh, how sad! That is very sad. I didn't know that. Gosh,
it was just something I read. It might not be true.
Well, but you never know. Sometimes
it's a very, very funny film, though.
Oh, I think so. It's well worth a watch.
And when you watch it, and you think, the strings, you don't notice the strings. That's
not
thing.
At all. And as a puppeteer and a marionette person, even though they're sending it up, some of that walking, boom, 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 like they used to do with Thunderbirds and all those, because they would never walked, properly, bless them. It was just, they were more interested in getting the realism, the eyes blinking and the mouth sinking properly and all the rest of it. And they were like little human beings. They weren't sort of puppet characters. I always remember John Blundell always used to say, because he did Brains and Zuni, and he designed a few of the other characters, and Stingray, he did lots of those monster things. He loved all the fantasy characters, and he did brilliant designs for all those. But once they moved on to more and more realistic stuff, and that was, he sort of got out of it before then. He moved on and did other work. But no, it's quite interesting. I'm probably along his lines. I'd I don't really like seeing puppets imitating exactly what humans can do. I like puppets that take elements of, if they're human characters, elements of humans' movements and stuff, and either sending it up or being very serious about it. But that's the thing. Don't copy a human, and again, don't let puppets go on and on and on, talking. Boring. Let the actors do that. They've got movable faces. All right, you can move even with electronic lip movement. It's really boring just to see that. It's much better seeing them move. They're reactors. They react to situations, puppets. That's the big thing with them.
The inclusion of puppets and pantomime and variety as well.
Oh, yeah.
How important is that to you?
Oh, immensely. I love seeing puppets in variety. I mean, I love variety anyway. I mean, I've always loved it, as I say. Yeah, I think it's very important. If it works, I mean, for instance, Rainbow did quite a few, the characters, the Zippy, George and Bungle and Geoffrey did a load of pantos over the years, and they were terribly successful. I'm afraid I was a bit snobby about it. I didn't join in with the panto seasons, sadly. Well, not sadly, I just felt that maybe the puppets were they were made for television. Zippy, for instance, is, there's not a lot you can do. They can face the audience and chat away and go up and down and pop up over in another corner or something, but it's not like Sooty. You can pick up stuff and chuck things and be a part of the whole thing. And even with Basil Brush, who does loads of panto, but he's in his booth and he's there, and it's more about the voice, although he sings, and the guy that does him now, I'm sure I'm allowed to say, Mike Windsor, he's lovely. His background is dancing and singing and all the rest of it, so he's very into panto stuff. But the puppet actually doesn't do an awful lot, but he has a different costume for different scenes, a bit like, the dames. It'll come in. I'm not saying there's as many costumes as a dame change, but there's all that, and that makes it. And he's very witty with the comedy. It's more, again, it's him reacting to whoever's beside him and what he says, or what he says and their reaction. It's all about that. So, I love it. I mean, I've sadly only done one professional panto, which was, fun enough, with Muffin the Mule, the very first television icon. This was way back, I think it was 80s or something. I'm hopeless with the years. But it was at Theatre Royal Windsor, and we had lovely Bernie Clifton. What did I say? Winton? Bernie Clifton. And he was my sort of foil with the puppet. And he was like Idle Jack or something like that. And it was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the musical Dwarfs, I think we had to check. Anyway, whatever it was. And, I had a ball. It was such fun. I love the Theatre Royal Windsor anyway. It's a lovely theatre, and I went back about 3 times to see our other pantos after I was on it, because I knew all the same stage crew and everything. And you just have fun with the audience. I mean, we had loads of shows. I think it was a 7-week season or something, and sometimes it was 3 shows. It's hard going. You don't stop, but oh my goodness, when you're out there, I mean, we were a bit naughty. I mean, Muffin didn't speak, and that's the picture of him there. I'm sorry, those of you, I'm afraid there's a nice picture I've got in this room.
It's in colour.
It is in colour, so use your imaginations. Anyway, but it was a bigger Muffin for the theatre, and we put him in a caravan, and I was pushed on and I was hidden, and you just saw Muffin. But it was big enough for Bernie, for instance, to have a little scene, and Snow White had a scene with him, and the Prince did. They were my main bits, and it was lovely. I mean, Bernie had this cap on, and I remember I thought, what can Muffin do? Because he doesn't talk; he's just nodding and being a bit obstinate. And I could be all sort of stroppy and say, "Oh, come on," and all this. But I used to knock his hat off. Puppet. I suddenly discovered it in doing the shows, and so it was. Those things, and we worked together, and he's an absolute gem, and he does a lovely podcast every Sunday on Facebook, and I love listening to him. Or live stream, I think you call it, don't you? And he's there, and he's 85 or something, and he's still he's just there. He's all
top
those
guy.
Absolute top guy, and a lovely person, and lovely stories. I just love all his multitude of events and shows he's been involved in. And of course it's visual comedy. He's into using props and silliness, all that sort of stuff. So it's sort of similar to puppetry. We're sort of about probably visual humour. I mean, yes, Basil's great with the old voice and everything, but I think the visual stuff is the main thing with puppets too, and musical stuff. But I love it. I think there's a place, and I think they'll always have if there's a chance to have a puppet in a panto or a variety show, I'm sure that it'll be used. I think it's sort of coming back. I mean, certainly ventriloquism is coming back. I think I said it right, that word. It's a bit difficult. I haven't got my right set in, but it's sort of, I don't know, with all these wonderful people that are doing stuff, and it's sort of topical, and I don't know, it's just fun to see. It's funny, I didn't always like vent dolls close up. There was a vent guy that came to the Little Angel once. It was like a party, sort of private party we were having, and he came down the auditorium, and he was sort of doing his puppet, and he sort of did it in the face like, oh, go away, I don't like it. But I loved it on stage. I mean, Arthur Worsley, it was, as I say, is one of the first people I saw, and luckily enough, John Blundell also was into variety and dance and all circus and all sorts of things, and he knew all these people, and he was actually we went to see Arthur Worsley. I hate to say it was a black and white minstrel show all those years ago at the Victoria Palace. They were doing
of its time,
exactly, absolutely. Anyway, he was special guest, and he was doing his act, and I'd seen him on the Palladium, of course, and here it was live doing this marvellous Charlie Brown. And then we went backstage because John was going to do some work on. I think he had two Charlies, and one of them needed a bit of work on, and John was going to do that. And I sort of sat in this kid of 14, I think, oh my God, he's so good. And it was so lovely seeing the puppet and that little bit of hair that when he whizzed it round, it's funny, I'm getting quite old now, but I've got memories of all these amazing people. Musical, we haven't talked about musical. I've been so lucky. I saw Hetty King perform. I saw Jack Train perform. I've seen, people like Max Bradgraves years ago at Brinsworth House, but all these wonderful people, I've learnt so much from watching them, and there again, visual humour, all this, so it's all very special.
How do you cope with the stress on the arms and the hands?
Well, I'll tell you what, with Zippy, I learnt to do stuff. For instance, he's quite big and quite heavy, and keeping up. What I used to do is I'd lean because I've got one hand in the head, usually my left hand, because the right hand, funny enough, I am right-handed, but I used to keep my right hand because sometimes Zippy would have to write something down or draw something. If I tried it with my left hand, I mean, it doesn't have to be brilliant, but it was rubbish. But Zippy is always brilliant, so Anyway, so I've got my hand in there, and my other hand, Zippy always used to sort of sit with his other hand under his chin, and it was like, and he's bored, you're very boring, Geoffrey, or something like this, and that was a way of resting the puppet. I could rest the puppet on there. So there was lots of techniques that people wouldn't know too much, that I'm having a rest there. And also, obviously, if I wasn't in the shot, I would take my hand down. But on stage, you just have to grim and bear it, really. You don't notice it because you're so concentrating on the performance and, as I say, listening to the audience and all the rest of it. As soon as the tabs come in, you do feel it. And it's, for instance, I did a musical tour of the musical Dr. Dolittle. We had all puppets made by the Henson Company, and it was originally Philip Schofield was Dr. Dolittle, and we had various Dr. Dolittle.
That was started off at Hammersmith.
That's right.
I was there on the press night.
Were you really? Oh, right.
And the boat got stuck.
Yes. Well, I mustn't say luckily. That's a terrible thing to say. I wasn't in that production, but I did the tour. But I did see it 3 times because my friend Nigel was directing the puppets in it, or puppet director, and there was the main. And I mean, it's a funny old stage, that, because basically it's very wide out front, but it goes like that into triangle. So it's I think it was built as a cinema, basically, and they sort of, I don't know, use this. But anyway, they improved. I think the tour was improved. We did we had about 6-week rehearsal for the tour, which went on for 18 months. So 18 months of my life was, because it started off as a 6-month tour. I think we're talking about 1999, I think, and then it was 2000, something like that. And it was, we improved, some of the sets were improved. The boat did rock properly. I mean, it's amazing, all the machinery.
Money as well that they spent on that back
Oh
then.
my goodness, absolutely. And then the puppets. I mean, I was working Polynesia the parrot, there was the glove puppet. We actually we had a glove puppet scene. We changed the scenes at the beginning. We had her as a glove puppet. I was hiding behind the chair. Philip and I were on stage, at the opening, and there was the gauze, and then it went up, and there was Polynesia on the top chatting away with Julie Andrews, voice click track. And then we had this animatronic one, which I worked in wings. I had to learn to look from the side, try and see. It's weird. There wasn't anything like a monitor or anything like that to see. So I was doing it and hoping that the parrot was moving. But it had 13 servo motors in it. So there was the beak movement, there was the wing movement, there was the head up and down, there was a tail movement.
That's
and I had to learn
20 odd years ago as well.
Yeah, and that was early animatronics. Nowadays I worked on Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, the Netflix series, and that has very sophisticated. I hadn't worked. They said, "Oh, you've done that." I said, "Oh, yes." And I looked and I thought, "Well, it's simple. Oh my God, what does this do?"
They're like the remote control car.
Yeah, like exactly. If you have a remote control plane or a boat or something, you've got the aerial. Well, in my day, there was an aerial sticking out, and that was murder because somebody backstage would walk past and break the aerial. Oh please. But and I wanted to put a sign on my back. I am actually in this scene. Because stage crew, because we were touring, you've got different stage crew, obviously, every time. And they come and see you standing there and think, "Oh, what are you doing? You having a good time?" It's, terrible. But so I didn't actually put a sign on my back saying I'm actually working. But I always remember that was a hazard. But sometimes, in the early days too, with radio control stuff, sound people got the knowledge that they had to consult all the radio cabs or all the taxis because their radio frequencies could be the similar frequency that they use for. So what happened was I'd be starting off and suddenly you'd get a taxi thing come into the theatre, through the theatre, or it wouldn't work. It would go on and I think, what's going on? I can't do anything. And so before we arrived at, I don't know, where would we play? Say Liverpool, the Empire or something. They'd phone up all the taxis and say, "Look, this is the frequency we use. Does it interfere with your?" No. All right, fine. And all that. Things you wouldn't think of, but had to be done. We had people on the tour that were had maintenance for the puppets because the puppets were quite delicate and they're travelling. They get knocked around a bit, had to be touched up and painted and all the rest. And if sometimes the servos wouldn't work properly. We had a guy that would take the head off and unscrew and put all these whatever stuff on. But that was great fun. It's lovely working with Philip. Very nice. We worked with 3 different Doolittles. Philip, most of the time, worked with lovely Nicholas, what's his name? He does Panto as well, and I've forgotten.
Paul Nicholas.
Thank you, Paul Nicholas, because it was part of his company, because he's also producer, isn't he? He works with John. Is it John? I've forgotten the man. He's just David Kahn. David. I'm so bad with names. Anyway, I know that he's just taken over. I don't know if it's Kudos,
David
but
Ian.
Yes, David Ian. He was our main producer guy. Let's see. So I worked with some wonderful Dr. Doolittles in Dr. Doolittle, Philip Schofield, Paul Nicholas, and lovely Russ Abbott, and they were wonderful. And it was quite hard. I remember Russ came in before Paul Nicholas, and Philip had done it for ages, and it was like he had to take over from like Philip and all that, and it was quite tough for him at the beginning. And I remember he did a thing to the company. He said, "Look, I'm the new boy. I'm coming in. I'm going to play it differently to Philip because I'm Russ Abbott. But if you've got any problems with the way I'm doing it, if we're not, please come and see me." And I thought, how brave! And this was like when he first came in. He'd done I think it was just before we were going to do our sort of run through with him. He'd been rehearsing, obviously, with a production manager or whatever, but this was a full company rehearsal. And I thought, blimey, how brave is that? Because it's quite tough. And I knew people in the cast that were thinking, "Oh, going to miss Philip, it's not going to be the same," and da da da. And I found Russ absolutely wonderful to work with, and we became quite friendly, really. I mean, we go and have a meal. His wife used to come and say, "Oh, come and have a meal with us." It was quite nice. I remember the production manager saying, "Oh, going out or going off with a talent, are you?" I said, "Yes, we've been invited to, supper afterwards," and all this sort of rubbish. But no, he was really nice, and very nice to everybody. That's what I thought. Again, it's all part of the Doctor theatre, being nice in theatre. I mean, I think if you're not too ego and all the rest of it, that doesn't get carried away, you're going to be liked, and people are. I mean, I've got friends that I've known for years and years, and we're still friends. We've never fallen out. We might have had disagreements, but that's different. We're still friends, so no, it's very important that I think it's very much a family business, isn't theatre? I mean, even puppetry and panto and dance and musical and all the rest of it. A lovely person I must mention, talking of musical, is the wonderful Roy Hudd. Oh my goodness, I was so lucky to work with him. I did a semi-documentary, I suppose it's a drama documentary, I think they call them, for Channel 4, called The Puppet Man. And he played a character, a real life character called Walter Wilkinson. And we went down to Dorset and all these places, and we filmed in the actual places that he played. This would be in about the 1920s, so we had all this lovely old costumes and stuff. And I was doing the puppetry. He was a glove puppeteer, and I did all the puppetry. And Roy was behind me doing the voices, and a lot of the time we were improvising. I mean, he was just a joy. His son Max was in it just briefly. And then as the years went on, we kept in touch. I mean, he's great. He used to send Christmas cards to everybody. I mean, he's amazing, absolutely lovely. And then when did I meet him again? I think we did a bit of publicity for that when it came out. This was probably in the 70s or something like that, maybe early 80s. I'm so bad on the years. But anyway, that was lovely. But then I was playing up at in Ipswich, the studio theatre of the wonderful theatre, which I've forgotten the name of again, which was dreadful, very nice theatre. Anyway, somebody will type it in and say it was this theatre. Anyway, I played there, and I got in touch with Roy because I knew that he lived in Ipswich with Debbie, his wife, and everything. And I said, "Do come along and see the show." And he said, "Oh, we must come along." And they were morning and afternoon shows. So we were in the studio theatre, not in the main theatre. But he said, "Look, come and stay with us. We're only in a village, And I thought, right, I hadn't seen him for ages, but what a sweet man. So, and Debbie drove. He never drove. So Debbie drove up at the end of one of our shows. I had the whole weekend with them, walking the dogs, and they're lovely. Oh, and we whittled on. We spoke, well, Roy, what a raconteur, what the word is. I mean, he just chatted away, and we talked a bit like we're talking about musical, variety, puppets, everything. And he had this amazing collection of musical songs. I think a lot of his stuff is going to a university. I think probably East Anglia University, but fantastic. And Debbie is an absolute charmer, his wife. She was a dancer, and she's also produced, funny enough, his some pantos as well. But I think she's producing another one. I know Roy's been. I think it's the 2nd anniversary of his death now.
Yes.
And so she's doing a panto. She's directing a panto, and I can't remember where it is, but she's doing that, which is lovely. But she was just a joy too to be with. She's really down to earth, and she directed the 2 pantos that I saw at the Wilton's musical that Roy did. The first time he played Dame, it was wonderful, and that was with now. Mother Goose was one, and the first one was can't remember. This is very bad, so I do apologise, everybody, not remembering all these. But anyway, and it was lovely seeing him afterwards and all the rest of it. But yeah, he was an iconic, wonderful person to meet and to be with. I've been very lucky, actually. I met quite a few quite well-known people in the business, and I've enjoyed. I mean, I'm still a bit of a star. I think, oh my goodness, you're so famous, and all this sort of stuff. But it's lovely. They're so nice usually. The real good ones, I think, are the ones that've been in a long time. They know the job. They know how to meet and greet people without making it sound like it's a bore. I mean, yeah, there was lots of times that I've been in. Think, I really don't want to see people, after the end of the show, because it's really tiring. But then you think, wait a minute, they've paid the money, they've asked if they could see, and it's like signing autographs at the end of when you come out of the theatre. You've got to do that sort of stuff. It's important because the people
signed up for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of your job. It's exactly, you signed up for it. That's perfect. So, whoops, I've just knocked the table. Sorry, microphone. But so, yeah, it's a lovely thing. You're going to ask me another question because I'm rambling now.
I'm poised.
You're poised.
I'm poised, ready to. In an age where CGI and with children, when they see the most, amazing things on TV, how can puppetry compete with that?
Interesting question. I was. It's all right. I'll pay you later. But no, the thing is, I thought when CGI sort of came about, and it's been over the years in film and telly and stuff. I thought, oh well, puppetry is I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to have to go on the dole or something, or do a real job, road sweep or something. And so it's in commercials that I noticed, which was a sort of slightly different thing. I did a commercial with Brains, the Thunderbirds character, for Drench Water a few years ago, and that was a mixture of real puppetry and CGI. And I said, why? You've paid all this money to get a new puppet made and get the all the sort of the license from, I'm not going to say Jerry Anderson, but I think it was Granada Television he sold it to originally, the Thunderbirds thing. So there was all that, loads of money they were paying for all that, and they made this marionette. And they said, well, it's quite nice to have a real puppet as well. And I said, well, you a lot of it is CGI, but we can't do the CGI without seeing the puppet's movement, or else it would all look like a cartoon going around. And I thought, oh, all right, okay. And so we had to learn this. It was a dance, basically, with Brains. You can see it on YouTube. And it's quite a funky dance. They had a dancer they filmed with all these CGI, all these funny things, dots and stuff all over him. And he was doing all these high kicks and da-da-da-da-da. And then the computer image they did that and made a sort of strange sort of skeleton thing of that. And then with that, sorry, you can tell I'm very technical, they then had the puppet, and we did a copy of what the dancer could do as much as we could. There was about 5 or 6 of us working this one part. I was holding the main control, but the others were doing because it had all sorts of arm movements and leg sort of special stuff. And we did it as much as we could. I did have a slight, not row, but a little bit of moment with the choreographer. I said, look, it is a puppet. We can do that as close as we can, but we can't do all these spins or whatever it is that this guy's doing. And she sort of understood. I think she choreographed it for a dance and then said, well, the puppet can now do it. Well, hello. Anyway, but we actually became friends in the end, so that was good. But the thing was, we had the CGI guy they filmed that my bit, and they chose the bits they'd use with a real puppet and then go on to the CGI. But he needed the puppet to really get as a reference, and to get all the sort of, like, I did loads of photo shoots as well, getting the way the costume, if it moved a little bit, so they could get the creases in. I mean, all sorts of stuff. And then we did a whole thing of the whole puppet going round the. It was extraordinary. So it worked quite well. I can if I watch the ad now, I can say, oh, that's the puppet bit. That's the CGI. And you can hardly notice. There's one tiny bit that I think they couldn't do with CGI, was the puppet falls on the floor and then he doesn't do that thing of pushing on the ground to get to get up. You need a bit of energy to push yourself up. Well, CGI couldn't do that, so it went on the ground and then it just sort of came up right then. I thought, oh, what a shame. Can't do that. It's just a technical thing. Probably can do it nowadays, I don't know, but they couldn't do it then. So I thought that's interesting. And then I've done other stuff where CGI's come in, but I've noticed now that directors are going back to puppetry because it's brilliant CGI. It's too good, it's soulless is the word. It doesn't have that slight sort of thing. When you have a puppet on your hand, it's sort of alive. There's something about the human hand inside it, or holding a rod or doing whatever. And even if it does a slight sort of jiggle, because puppets, might be slightly off at one, but that's natural. We're suddenly off something. We suddenly don't see something, and so we compensate as an audience watching that. Whereas the CGI is all perfect because they can do it, and it's a little bit too, I'm going to say robotic sometimes.
Too perfect. And
I honestly, I've just worked on a film which I'm afraid I signed an NDA, and a lot of it's going to be CGI, but the main bit that I've been very lucky enough to do, I'm doing the main puppet, and they didn't want that had to be a real puppet, and then the rest of it, and there are other puppets in it, but they're all CGI'd. It didn't matter, and so it's quite interesting. I think there's a thing of combining both rather than just saying, CGI is going to take over puppetries. So luckily, I don't have to be a road sweeper. I can still be a puppeteer and do this.
But for kids, though, do you think they can still be wowed by puppets?
Oh, definitely. If they've got to be worked well, for instance, I think a whole lot of kids are loving watching the Netflix Dark Crystal thing. All right, they're for slightly older kids, but these characters, Skeksis and these, the Gelflings and all these weird and all this amazing technology that's gone into it. Wonderful director, Louis, French guy, and it's fantastic. But I think they love it. They overdosed, of course, with cartoons and CGI. Sadly, we haven't got just BBC, ITV, and Channel 4. We've got 20 channels all on the satellite stuff, and so there's all these specialized children's channels, and most of them, sadly, they're churning out all these cartoons and stuff, and so they're into this sort of content wise I'm not so sure about. I think people have said, isn't it sad we've sort of lost the golden age of children's television was like from 60s to the 90s or something like that, or to the 80s or 70s, that sort of period. And in a way, I do know what they mean, because puppetry was very big on telly, particularly for young children. And nowadays, cartoons have sort of taken over. There's still the odd puppet show, but the budgets, because they're smaller companies, it's not like BBC or ITV. Even Rainbow, we didn't have a massive budget, but I think we have probably a bigger budget than some of the stuff they're doing today, because they just don't put it in. They have to churn them out because it's daily, and so the production values perhaps are not so good, and it's a shame. I know I've got grandchildren, both, or 2 girls and 2 boys, and the girls love the stories, and the boys do, but they're very much into their computer, their iPads, their games and stuff like that. But they will watch puppet stuff. Probably if it's a bit sort of Thunderbirdish, or that, because they're boys. They're he's 8 and 6, the 2 of them, and they're a bit keen. But if I went to visit them the other weekend, and I said, can we watch something, and it was a puppet thing, and they actually sat down and they sat through it, and they were quite happy. It was quite interesting. Maybe because I was sitting with them, maybe I'm granddad, and we'll do what you want, sort of thing. And I also watched what they wanted to watch. I usually fall asleep if they're playing endless games and stuff on their X-Pads or something. Xbox. That's right. You see, I'm not at all into all that. But
they've been treated so well, whereas, and I don't think the commissioners are now brave enough to put puppets. You wouldn't see Zippy and George in anything now, or their equivalent now. No, because they think kids kind of they patronise kids by it's got to be CGI.
Yeah.
And I don't think, as a dad myself, I've watched the DVDs of Rainbow with my children. They've watched Roland Rats.
Oh yes, wonderful. Yeah, lovely David.
And you think to yourselves, nobody's brave enough to bring these things back or come up with something new.
No, I agree with you, really. it's hopefully, things might change, but it's not. It's going to take a while, I think, because I don't know. It's this thing of. I think it's the maltiness of children's stuff is out there. I mean, on the media, that's when we just had the BBC and the ITV and Channel 4 and all those things. You didn't have that choice, and the choice isn't all that good, really. As you say, the producers are not brave enough to do a puppet show anymore.
So how did this funny-looking yellow fella come into your life then?
Well...
Or shall I say you came into his life?
Yeah, well, actually, no, there's a story, and it is in the book. But basically, I was at the Little Angel Theatre, and there was a knock at the door, and it was a producer wanting to put on a new children's preschool programme. Sesame Street had been on Channel 4, and the educational people and generally ITV said, look, it's all very nice, it's a wonderful show, but the spellings of the American, like theatre and all that, and this pronunciation, Z and all the stuff,
sidewalk,
all that, it's teaching children too many, and awesome and all those words. It's all too much. So we ought to make our own preschool stuff, and then we can keep it sort of a bit more sort of English. And so that's where Rainbow came along, and lots of other preschool programs came along in the early 70s. Well, I was making a set, I wasn't making, friends of mine making a set of puppets, and it was a set of puppets called the Hubble Bubbles. It was a title I'd made up, and they were these strange looking creatures, and one of them on the workshop bench and they were making was one, and I'll show it to you. It's like a brown potato, a little bit of black hair and two little black eyes with a great big zip across its mouth. Because I thought, what a clever idea, because he was going to be a chatterbox and the naughty one, and zip him up. That's what I thought. Anyway, thought nothing of it. We were doing and then this lady came in with her researcher, and she chatted to John Wright. Now, John Wright had spent many, many years trying to get like adults and family audiences interested in puppetry. He'd started off doing sort of young stuff. He wasn't really all that keen. Television didn't really interest him. He was interested in theatre. So he was chatting to producer. The researcher was wandering around the workshop. And I don't know for certain, but I believe that she saw this zipped character along with some others there and thought, oh, that's good. Probably took a note or remembered. And about a year later, my lovely friend who I mentioned in the podcast or in this chat, Violet Philpott, she was asked to be the puppeteer, the original puppeteer on Rainbow, to work Zippy. She made the original Zippy. And anyway, I said, oh, Violet, I'm so delighted. We had conversations and stuff on the phone. I said, it's marvellous, Violet, that would be fantastic. And she said, yes, it's going to help my company and all the rest of it. Anyway, she did it, and I watched it when it first came. It took a while for them to obviously get the series underway, and it came out. And there was this puppet with a zip. I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder where they got. And I suddenly remembered, and I thought, well, but what can you do? You can't do anything. And I don't know for certain even now that was it. But I like to think that was.
You had a part.
I had a part in his creation. But but anyway, and make a long story short, Violet sadly injured her back doing the puppetry. She was slightly older than us, and she pulled did something there, and so she couldn't carry on. And another puppeteer, a friend of mine, John Thurtle, who was a brilliant puppeteer, he'd worked with us at the Little Angel Theatre and then set up his own company with his partner, and in fact they produced Button Moon and all these characters and Playboard and all sorts of wonderful shows. He took over from Violet because he'd become great friends of Violet, like a load of us had, and he then was so busy on making. So he was a brilliant maker. He remade the Zippy and George. Well, George, in fact, I think I don't know whether he designed it, but he certainly made it because it changed slightly after Violet left. They like Bungle Bear was quite a scary looking,
yes.
Tiny little head, and lovely actor inside, John Leeson, who's famous for K9 and all these lovely things on. But anyway, they changed the bungle look, and they also thought, well, let's get rid of some of the characters. There's probably too many, and they all sound a bit similar. We'll have just the 2 puppet characters. We'll have Zippy, because he's obviously popular, and we'll have a foil, George, a pink hippo, and that's when John made the George character, and he continued making the puppets right up until the Rainbow finished, basically. So 20 years he was making, although he wasn't actually, he did come back and do odd bits of puppeteering, but I carried on doing the Zippy thing, and basically it was through John. John phoned me and said, Ronnie, would you be interested? Look, I can't stay, and I've got, a Button Moon series to do, or whatever it was he was going to do, and I just think you should be the next one on. And I thought, my God. And I always had this thing, I thought, now what have I done in my life? I've worked in theatre, done a little bit of television, but I've never done a series. Ding! And I thought, oh, lovely. Anyway, I went along, had an interview with Pamela Lonsdale, the original producer, and she was amazing. She was very funny, quite strong headmistress here, in charge. And she said, so what sort of puppetry experience have you had? I said, well, quite a lot. I've done the odd television and a little bit of film work here and there. She said, oh, very nice. And I thought, oh dear, she's not impressed at all. And then I said, she said, so what other puppeteers? Have you worked with some sort of well-known? I said, oh yes. I said, I worked with Jan Busselin and Hogarth. She went, oh, Jan Busselin and Hogarth, the Hogarth puppets. Oh, didn't they do Muffin the Mule? I said, yes, that's right. I worked with them. Oh, and that, I don't know whether that clinched it. It was a bit weird, but anyway, I thought, thank you, Jan, thank you, Anne, thank you, Muffin. And so and she said, oh, lovely, well, you can start then. She said, it's all very matter of fact, we have a 6-week contract. We don't keep, we don't have retainers or anything like that. So hopefully it'll go on. Well, 20 years later, it's fantastic. So I carried on doing that Zippy. I wouldn't have had this lovely little terraced house that I'm living in. I wouldn't have got married. I wouldn't have had all the my kids, and wouldn't have had a car and all that stuff. I lived in bed sits up until that moment, to be honest. And so Rainbows, 20 years, I suppose, is quite a long time. And it's still going on. I still do Zippy appearances and stuff. It's sort of, I've just done one for a quiz show. I think it's a Channel 4 thing, just literally in COVID. So funny, having to wear a mask, and producers. And I can't remember. I think I've signed a thing, but I don't even remember the title of the thing. I just did some. Zippy appeared and just did some. I think there were clues to the answers to the question. I've yet to be paid, by the way. It'd be very nice to be paid. Anyway, so. But yeah, it's still going on. It's amazing. And we've got the 50th anniversary, can you believe, next year. So, and I have spoken to now a company that's sort of involved with, I think they're affiliated to Fremantle, but they're called Boat Rocker, and they own the rights. And I reminded them the other day, I said, oh, it's 50 years. She said, yes. Well, Danger Mouse has got its 40th, because they own Danger Mouse as well. And they said, yes, we've been doing stuff for Danger Mouse, but yes, we definitely want to do. And I said, well, of course, I'm prepared to help promote it, blah,
we
blah,
need to
blah.
bring it back. That's what it is.
I
we need
know.
It back.
Oh, you're so kind. Wouldn't it be lovely? But I don't know.
Because they did the adult kind of things as well, which it was all right, but we just love.
I know. They. I don't know.
Kids need this.
They definitely do, and the way that it was handled, it was all right. Had the educational content, but it was done with fun. We got on so well together.
You never realised you were being educated.
No, exactly, and that's the right way. It's as I say, when we remember a teacher in our school days, it's always about their enthusiasm. If they were enthusiastic about the subject, we picked it all up, and it's the same thing. The characters were strong. They were funny. Zippy was so naughty, always knew everything, and then when he zipped up, they thought, oh my goodness. And it was just perfect. And George was a perfect foil for him, and Geoffrey was wonderful as the sort of father figure trying to cope with a big bear and strange, unique looking Zippy and this pink.
When you think of it that way, you think, what on earth is this about?
I know.
But then there were other things like for BBC they had a character called Wordy.
Yes, indeed.
A beautiful puppet.
Yeah.
Very bizarre.
Yeah. That's right.
I couldn't tell you anything about that show.
No.
Just him.
Yeah.
And that's the power of puppetry.
Oh, absolutely. The visual thing, I mean, it is very important, obviously, but it's about their strength of character, their sort of... I suppose the naughty ones always remain in... Because you always thought, wish I could do what Zippy does. That sort of thing. But, there's a thing called the power of the puppet, and it's lasting. I'm amazed. I've just done my first live gig. Wow. Was it last weekend? It might have been. I was at Nottingham Puppet Festival and I was doing a talk. Sadly, I was visually out there with a live audience of about, when I say sadly, it was, I think there was 30. Because of COVID, I think it was a cinema in Nottingham, the Broadway, and they were lovely and they did a brilliant job. But COVID restrictions and everything, they had to have separate aisles and all the rest of it. I think there might have been 30 people, and they originally thought they could have 50, but all the restrictions, blah blah blah. Anyway, it was intimate but very nice. A guy was interviewing me and we showed clips of various films I'd worked on, and obviously rainbow bits, and we chatted. And these are all, some of them were, I mean, over 40, and they'd come about that 30. Some of them are younger, but they were all loved. They came because, it's done Zippy on Rainbow. It's there. I suppose it's still out there on social media. That's the thing. And people do, if they're really interested, think what can they, but also we all remember our childhood favourite puppet things. I remember Sooty with Harry as a kid. I remember all the Watch with Mother stuff, Bill and Ben and all those things. That was my childhood. But I mean, I've not forgotten them. They're wonderful. It's a special time, and it stays locked. I didn't realise how locked it is in people's memory. Their childhood is very special. I mean, if there's something that made them happy, it's there permanently. It's like lovely music, your favourite music. It's sort of, you hear it and think, oh God, that brings back memories. If people hear the theme tune to Rainbow, da, 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 da. Oh, it's Rainbow. They know it. There you go. It's very special.
How much of an influence has Kenneth Williams been on you? Because I'm sitting here and it's as if Kenneth has sort of been absorbed into you somehow.
I think he probably has. I do love Kenneth Williams. I loved his stuff.
Because the voices and
it's all very nasal, and I think I do have a sort of nasal voice. People have said. I mean, you're not the first person. I don't know. I think his voice work. Fat Will o' the Wisp. Oh, snap! There you go. Wasn't that brilliant? I mean. Fabulous stuff.
Evil Edna, the TV.
Oh, I loved it. Oh gosh.
What was the name of the caterpillar? I forgot his name. Listeners, you can Google it.
Yes, please Google it for us. We're off on age. Well, I am. Sorry. I'm talking to a very young man here. But no, Oh, Kenneth Williams. Yeah. Oh, I saw the Carry On films. I mean, right from the start, Carry On Sergeant and all those things. I don't know whether I thought, I want to be like Kenneth Williams. I never thought that. It's just, I think I have a voice that's got similar sort of tones. And when I do, posh voices, I can, I do all that. And, oh, yes, when I'm there, do. I don't know, I just make it a bit older. I don't know, maybe I do the same sort of...
It's pretty uncanny, to be fair.
Is it really? Oh,
really?
Wow. Well, I don't mind. I think it's an honour to try and emulate that. I don't think I'd want to do. I mean, there's the brilliant documentaries the BBC made of him, which is really quite sad life. But it was quite. I can't remember the guy that did him, but he was brilliant.
Michael Sheen.
Michael Sheen, wasn't he brilliant? I mean, I thought some of those sort of drama docs were really good on people.
My friend David Benson also does.
Oh, he's lovely, David Benson. He was brilliant. Oh, really? Oh, lovely. Well, I mean, his Dad's Army stuff with lovely Jack. Is it Jack?
Jack Lane.
Jack Lane. I mean, I'd love to meet them. I haven't met them, but I just think they're lovely. But what was I saying? Oh, Kenny Williams. It's just, I suppose stuff filters in or something, or. I don't know. I don't think, as I say, I wouldn't want to be Kenneth Williams on stage or anything. But if the voice is there, but you're right. People have. I mean, as you say, you're not the only one. But I take it as a compliment, really, because he's. I mean, talk about, as I say, we said his voice work. He was an amazing sort of character. I mean, gosh, poor thing, influence. Very complicated, but big influence on so many British people on the carry-ons. If it wasn't, I mean, I think it was a shame. I only saw him once on stage. I had a big passion for Ingrid Bergman, and in the 80s she did a Shaw play, Captain Brassbound's Confession or something like that. Very sort of odd play, really. And she has this lovely accent, Swedish, and she was playing this English country lady well, and she looked gorgeous. This was she still looks stunning. I mean, I was like Casablanca mad. All those 40s films that I'm sort of and Kenneth Williams had a part in it as a sort of pirate. He had a beard, a pirate, like a pirate character or a sailor or something. And this little guy walked on, and she's tall, wonderful. Anyway, there was a scene, and people just laughed the minute he opened his mouth. And I don't know whether he did it the night I was there, but he used to sometimes just go off on one, and wait, and people would wait and say, "Well, when you finish, can we get on with the play?" That sort of thing, because he just loved working in an audience. That was it, his life. But another person who I absolutely adore, I don't sound like or anything like that, was Tommy Cooper. I had the pleasure of working with that man at Thames, and did one magic trick with him. This ball, wonderful. And it's so sweet. One of the floor managers came up and said, "Look, we're recording in Studio 1. We were in Studio 3, like little cupboard. And, Studio 1 is the big varieties, the big studio at Tennington." And he said, "Look, Tommy needs a puppeteer, and obviously you're working, you're here. Can you do it?" And got permission to go across. And so we did. I went to Kew Gardens rehearsal. Bless him, he didn't turn up, but his son and his wife was there, and his son sort of went through it a little bit, and it was those silver ball that he said, "I've got this ball, it's going to go from one hand onto my head and onto my other hand. It's really good." And I was in blue, dressed behind. It was all that hideous chroma key business. And then it sort of goes up on his head, and then it disappears, and then it comes in the wings or something. It was naff, but it's him. And so I did it a bit. I thought, oh, right, I think I can do that. It's fairly simple actions for me. And then he came in halfway through, and he just, shall we do any rehearsal? What? And it was like, oh, my goodness. And as soon as he walked in, you just start laughing. His big hands, his big feet, his whole, whole sort of physical look. He was just fun. He didn't mind. I mean, you weren't laughing. You were laughing because he was so lovely. That it was love, really, if you'd call it that. And he said, "Right, well, we better rehearse a bit." And so we did. And he said, "No, the ball stays up there." And he said, "Come on, where is it?" Or something. And then it comes out and hits him. It's it, or something. This sort of rubbish. And it was wonderful. I mean, I was practically wetting myself with laughter all the way. I could hardly, even when we were doing the take, because he was a natural comedian, absolutely natural. I don't know. Funny. My mother, fun enough, didn't like him. She always used to think, "Oh, I don't like his laugh. He's always laughing." But
funny bones.
Funny bones, absolutely. And the lovely thing he said, and Valerie, the puppeteer that was working, she did the ball coming in from the side, and she was George puppeteer at the times. And I remember we finished doing our little bit. It was in the can and everything. And he said, I said, "Look, come here. I've got these chickens. I'm sure we could do something next week with these chickens." That sort of thing. He was like, ideas. And we weren't allowed, we could do the one-off thing. And so we didn't. But, that was a joy. That's a highlight and it's a tiny little thing, really. I mean, I've got loads of things of working on Henson films and all that. But, I don't know. Tommy Cooper was a delight, and and Roy Hudd, lovely people. Gosh, I should look up my book. Actually, the book goes up to 2018, I think, or maybe before, because it wasn't published to 2019. So and I had to miss lots of tours and things we did with The Little Angel, for instance, because the editors of the book said, we want to get to the zippy bit. It's called Zippy and Me, so we've got to get all the gossip with the rainbow and all that sort of rubbish. So a lot of it, with the Little Angel, we toured. We went to America, we went to Israel, we went all over Europe touring marionette shows. So, and there's masses of stories with all that as well. So it's
Volume 2.
Volume 2, indeed. I hope so. That would be nice. Yes. I must get all my friends to write to the publisher. We want Volume 2, and maybe they'll decide to do it. But luckily it's still in print, so that's good. Available on all media sites such as Amazon and eBay. Sorry about that. I'm doing a self-promotion.
The plug.
That is the plug. It is necessary in this life, isn't it? Self-promotion. It's bits of, but I haven't done it until now, though, have I? So
I'll put the link as well underneath. There'll be a link
you're going to put a link.
There'll be a link so people can buy the book.
Marvellous. Yes. Lovely.
What would be your advice to young children, even older children, even people like myself who might think, I'd like to do this. What kind of puppet should they get? What kind of thing should people be doing if they want to get into it?
Well, I mean, the best thing, first of all, is to see as many puppet shows or puppet activity as possible. There's another link I'll give you, puppeteersuk.com, I think it is. And that usually has links to shows and stuff that puppets are on in. There's the British Puppet and Model Theatre Guild, which is another link that you could put on there. That would be very nice. That's fun enough. In a way, it deals a lot with amateur people, people that start in an amateur way but then go on professionally. There's a mixture of both, which is quite nice. And it's been going, in 5 years, it'll be the 100th anniversary of the guild. So that's amazing. But if you're a kid, I mean, just if you feel you could make something, I mean, you can buy puppets and have a go with them and see whether you feel happy with putting them on your hand. If it's a glove puppet, I mean, most people start off with a Muppet type puppet because they're out there, aren't they? And that's fun. But I think you can still get hold of sort of marionettes, Pelham puppets if you're interested in string puppets. But I would, when you get a chance, go and visit a puppet show and talk to the people after the show. Go and talk to them and say, look, how would I start? And because you've seen a show, you've shown interest already to them. If you just sort of write to them and say, I'd like to do puppets, it's not quite the same. But if they it sort of helps their ego, I suppose. If you've been in the audience, you've come back and said, we really love the show. Could we? I mean, they might say, can we see you backstage? Yes, a lot of puppeteers are very happy to show, as long as it's not 390 trying to swarm back. But and they can tell whether you've got a real interest or whether you're really keen to do stuff. What else? If there's these organisations to join, but they're which are quite useful because it just, as I say, gives you events and things like that. The Puppeteers UK is quite a good one. Online, there's loads of stuff. There's Facebook groups now. I mean, if they're interested in Rainbow, there's about 3 Rainbow groups. There's a wonderful podcast called the Panto Podcast. I've heard, if you're interested in pantomime or theatre generally, there's a marvellous guy. He's very good. I mean, he
I don't know who that one is, though.
No, I know. But there's lots of stuff. I think the kids now are so familiar with going online that they pick
There's
up
so
stuff.
many resources.
There are so
many
many resources.
You don't have to search or hunt like you used to.
Just put puppets and see what happens. Puppetry. If you know what type of puppetry you want to do, put Muppet type puppets, and you'll get loads of. You'll get rubbish, but you'll also get the good stuff as well. That's the only trouble with social. Is that they don't sort of say, oh, this one is really good.
AliExpress, who make kind of knockoffs, don't they, of things and things like Axtel.
Yes.
Which are.
Yeah,
I like Axtel.
Actually, they're better. Yeah. No, absolutely. But you just, I mean, I think perhaps if you're a young kid, maybe your parent look at it and say, "Well, Dad, I'm interested," or "Mum, I'm interested in this thing." Oh yeah. Oh, actually, let's have a look, and they might put you onto something and maybe a bit
Christmas
better.
List.
Well, Christmas list is the thing. Yes, that's right.
Get that started,
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think there's nothing like, and if you, and you don't have to be sort of extrovert. I don't think I suppose I am a little bit, but a lot of introvert people end up doing puppets because they can sort of hide behind the puppet. I mean, that you can say that about lots of actors and people like that. You never believe that on stage they're wild and big, and then suddenly, off stage they're quite quiet and shy and just want to hide away. But it's interesting. It's interesting.
Well, this leads me on to my last question. Your dream pantomime. So you can be in it.
Yeah.
You can be in the stalls watching it. You can choose the production, the venue, and your cast can be alive or dead.
Oh my goodness. Oh wow, that's a fabulous question. I think I'd like to be a part of a pantomime in the London Palladium because it's the home of British variety, and I have been to see stuff at the Palladium in my time. I haven't been to see these wonderful pantomimes which they've been doing in the last few years. So yes, that would be the place I'd like to perform. Excuse the row, my builders are doing wonderful things to my house. Oh gosh, live or dead, I'd love to. Oh gosh.
Well, have a think of the production first.
All right, the production would be good, wouldn't it?
And we work from there.
Okay. Oh wow, what's my favourite panto? I mean, Aladdin's quite fun because you've got the dame, you've got the young Aladdin, you've got the princess, you've got lovely magical stuff. I quite like the effects. I mean, Cinderella is another. See, I love the fact that you can now have, Cinderella going off in the coach and you have the ponies, but there's also the one I saw, I think it was in Nottingham, where they had this flying carriage and it sort of flew out. I mean, it was all clever electronic stuff, but it, wonderful. I love anything with those sort of effects. I know they can go wrong and all the rest of it. So it's a mixture of Aladdin and Cinderella. Which one would I go? Let's go with Cinderella, only because there's two. There's the ugly sisters, and I get a choice of two dames. I'd love to work with Roy Hudd, and these are people that are no longer with us, sadly, but Roy would be lovely to work with again. He was loved. People that I love, I adore Bernie Clifton. He was lovely to work with, all these lovely established people. Oh gosh, it's awful. You've put me on the spot. I mean, anybody that's fabulous, and there's so many wonderful, fabulous people out there. I know Bobby Davril, for instance, loves Zippy and George and stuff. It'd probably be great to have somebody like him involved. Who else? Oh, Ronnie. My mind's going blank, which is agony. So the venue's the Palladium. The Panto probably would be Cinderella. Who could be a lovely Cinderella? You see, I would like somebody beautiful and gorgeous. I'd love to work with Bonnie Langford, you see, as well, because she was lovely. I did work with her on Rainbow once, and she was lovely. Her mum, I don't know whether she's still alive. She must be in her 90s by now, but she ran the babes for the Theatre Royal Windsor, all the kids, and she, all sort of choreographed them and got them working, and that was wonderful. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm being very bad about this.
Have a think of your uglies. Who would be your
uglies?
uglies?
Oh my, oh wow, gosh.
I'll just take your uglies for you for this one then.
Okay, well I loved Chris Biggins. I mean, he's wonderful. I've not worked with him, but I mean, he's been around for so long and just, knows the business. Who would be the other one? There's some lovely ones. I mean, I tell you what, let's go. We've got Chris Biggins, and I don't know whether it's what's his name? He's a young guy, and he's riding. What's his first name?
Riding. That little kid with the funny.
Yeah,
gap.
With the funny gap.
Never heard of him. Jamie Riding.
Jamie.
Oh, he'll love this. Having another mention.
Another mention.
Another mention on the
well,
podcast.
Jamie, because he came here and saw the puppets years, a long time ago, and he's so enthusiastic and I don't know. I think it'd be nice to have a young and an old, have the mixture. I don't mean old. Sorry, I don't mean that.
More mature.
More mature and somebody young in the business, because he has got an amazing mobile face. His lips and everything is our Jamie. And because he does Punch and Judy, he's interested in, you know, the whole stuff, and he was really keen. No, that's so, yeah. Then we've got, we've got the who could play all the other bits and pieces. Because the sisters are great, and then we've got Cinderella, and we've got the fairy godmother, where we've got gorgeous people. There's been millions of them, hasn't it, through the years? Anybody? Oh gosh, who would do fairy godmother? I mean, I tell you, I would love to work again with, and I did, was lovely June Whitfield. I adored her. She is just lovely. I've met her daughter recently, and she is a darling as well. Really sweet, and she was so sweet. I sort of said, "Oh, I just loved your mum." You know, I've seen her. We did a sooty show together. She was a Scout's mistress or something, and you know, she's word perfect. She's funny. She's lovely. Oh, I mean, she would be lovely as a fairy godmother.
Who would you play then?
I don't know what I'd play. I don't think I would act in it. I'd probably sit in the audience and watch all these lovely people. No, there must be a puppet. There'd be a puppet in Cinderella. We'd have to put, I mean, Zippy could be in the party or something, or my Dodo could be. It's a bit small. I don't know. We could
Zippy on the decks.
Yeah, on the decks would be good. Yeah, you could do that. Yes, you know, for the music for the ball, that would be fun, wouldn't it? Bit more. And George, you know, that would be very funny. He could be. I could be. I know it'd be lovely to be like Gazemi, to just stand on the stage. I have actually stood on the Palladium stage years and years ago, but that was all. You know, I didn't. I think I was with John Blundell. I think he was seeing somebody, and we went and I saw it from the wings. You know, and I thought, oh my god, you know, it was just so iconic. But isn't it? I'm sorry, I'm not helping you much with the people, am I? But we've got the Uglies, we've got Fairy Godmother, we have a prince. I mean, any lovely young Juve, you know, lead could do. Somebody who's in. Maybe for the prince, if we go for the sort of male prince rather than the sort of female playing the male, would be Lee Meads, I think. I mean, he's sort of young and handsome and all the rest of it. I'm pretty bad at knowing, you know, the up and coming male leads for Panto. I sadly haven't been to a Panto for a rather long time, which is really bad.
But they're coming back this year.
I know, thank goodness. So I'm definitely going to, you know, book my seat. But and I suppose with Pantomime we could have some varieties, people in, you know, from the olden days. I mean, I loved people, not just Hetty King. She probably wouldn't fit in the pantomime too much, but she was wonderful. She was a male impersonator in the music hall days. But I'm trying to think of the lovely guy who did Vent act, old guy. He was really old when I saw him, and his wife used to do stuff with him. Sandy Powell, do you remember?
Yes.
Oh, so funny.
Dressed like a commissioner.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. It was a terrible moustache, and he was, wonderful. I mean, I love all the old musical people. I'd bring back Brucey, I'd bring back Norman, you know, Wisdom. I love a guy, I'm just remembering people now, but the lovely guy who did I love Max Wall. But there was another guy younger than him who was great friends, and he appeared with the Puppet Man with Roy and myself. Roy brought all his old mates, variety mates and theatre mates, and he did lovely dancing. There was Dickie Henderson and him.
Billy
Dainty, fabulous, lovely person as well. You know, he'd do a lovely spesh act or something. You know, I'd change it all. It'll all be a bit variety probably. We get away from the story. But and we've got to have nice singers and stuff. I'm sure there's some wonderful people that can, you know, sing. And I'm being dreadful not mentioning any names or anything. But anyway, is that all right?
That's fine.
Is that
Ronnie,
good?
Thank you for taking part in the Panto podcast.
Oh, I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming to my house and recording me there. I mean, wow. No, it's lovely. It's lovely doing personal, person-to-person chats. Very good. Thank you so much. I really love it.